Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our open house bonus talk today. It's really nice to see all of you here, and thank you. I know, for, especially those in America, I know it's your Thanksgiving weekend, so a special big thank you for taking the time away from family to come and be with me. I very much appreciate it. So, this is really a session just to say thank you for taking an interest in the work that's coming up in 2020, God, 2026. I can't believe it. I remember when it was the year 2000. It seems like the last 26 years have just flown by. But in 2026, and I just wanted to kind of do a session where I can give something back and to just really give you a within the session give you an overview of development. And over the last sort of 22 years of developing my own mediumship and the last sort of 15 or more years of teaching it, what I've come to understand about the development process and a way that you can develop, structure your development in order to get the most out of things. So I think the good place to start is the common problems that I see. What is it that we're trying to avoid? And one of the things that I think we are really trying to avoid is what I call a directionless development. This is what a lot of people developing mediumship are actually involving themselves in. They just don't really quite realize that they're doing it. And there's nothing to be embarrassed about if you are. It's usually because you're just not open to what we're supposed to be doing. So I'd like to start by just asking you all a question, and you can put your hands up virtually, or you can just raise your hand so I can see. But interested to know, how many of you at the moment are still doing exercises that you learned in your first seminar? How many of you kind of still practice them and still? Okay, it's a couple. So this is usually a couple of hands that go up. But so what what I want to kind of just make you think about for a moment is that quite often what I see students doing is they're going from seminar to seminar, hopefully having a really good experience and enjoying the experience. And then they kind of might, even in that seminar, if it's a good one, start to see the potential of what might be within their expression. But then in the after the seminar itself, don't actually do anything with what they've been taught. So what we have to kind of ask ourselves is what are we actually doing with what we've experienced in the seminar? If we're not actually practicing the exercises that we've been learned, and we're not applying it regularly, then what are we doing? What are we actually learning? That's the big question that I asked myself as a teacher when I was watching students do that. And I used to ask the same question at the start of every seminar I did at one time, just to sort of get a gauge of, well, what's actually happening here. And so what I mean by directionless development is really where students of mediumship are going from seminar to seminar, having a great experience of a seminar, and I'm sure having transformational experiences, things that change them or make them feel a certain way, but then are just doing nothing with what they've been taught, and then just moving from seminar to seminar, having these experiences, but it's just directionless. That's why I call it a directionless development. And that's really what I think we've got to try to avoid. If you think about it, if in any other aspects of life, you'd see it for what it is. If you went to like I don't know, a dance class or even a Tai Chi class, and you went to a seminar, you'd be learning the steps, and you try and replicate those steps outside of the class so that you're actually learning Tai Chi or dance or whatever you're doing. So it's always about applying what you've been taught, but we have to also have to make sure that we're applying it to the right thing. So that if that sounds a bit like what you've been doing, perhaps um, over the years, then hopefully this talk will help you to sort of recognize that and then give you a bit of structure in what to do to get the most out of the experiences that you're having. So, first of all, Um, Now we've kind of highlighted what the problem can be. Let's start with a bit of the philosophy that underpins the teaching. And this is obviously not, I'm not saying it's the philosophy that underpins all teaching. This is the philosophy that underpins very much my approach and where I'm coming from. I very much see mediumship as being a little bit like an iceberg. And I talked about this briefly in the open house sessions that we've had so far. At any given time, what we're seeing at on the surface of our expression is the tip of an iceberg, right? And as you know, with an iceberg, you only ever see the tip of something, but underneath that lies this huge mass that's invisible to the naked eye. And that's very much like your mediumship at any and mine as well, all of ours. At any given moment, we're just seeing the tip of the potential that's sort of being expressed through us. Now, there's some people that will teach you that mediumship is like a muscle that as long as you exercise it, it will grow and it will expand and it will get better. And I don't agree with that because there's lots of students that I bump into every year that although they're doing all this practice, that they kind of hit a plateau or a glass ceiling that they just can't seem to penetrate. So if it was like a muscle, then if you're putting all this effort in, you should be seeing something out the other end. And that does happen to a degree, but not to the degree where you could say it was like a muscle. Other teachers teach that look, it's nothing about exercises, it's not important. It's all about self-transformation. That as long as you transform and grow and deepen your understanding of yourself, the mediumship will deepen and develop and it will take care of itself. There is some truth in that. But that approach doesn't also account for the benefits that people have from exercises. So, what I've understood over the years is that you have to take a middle of the road approach, which is always the most boring approach because it's in the middle of the road, but it's usually where the truth is. We need to be, and so I'm saying this for you guys too, you need to be engaging in a dynamic development. And by that, I mean a development that puts as much emphasis on practical exercises and practical expression as your personal development. Let's just go back to the iceberg for a moment. The practical exercises that you're getting involved in are shaping and molding the tip of the iceberg, the part of your potential that's on the surface. Those practical exercises and your technical training is actually polishing and shaping and molding that's already on the surface, which is why I'm sure many of you this might resonate with what you've experienced so far. In the early days, the exercises make these big changes and you see this big shift and this big growth within your mediumship because that potential is raw potential. And as you start to shape it, you start to see an improvement. But then, like a sculpture, the more that you shape it, there's less work to do in terms of big things. It's now about small refinements, and eventually you can't shape it anymore. It's shaped. Your mediumship is now what it can be based on the level of potential that is on the surface, which is why for some people then we get to a stage where we seem to plateau or there's this sort of glass ceiling that we can't break through. The personal development is actually what's lifting the iceberg out of the water. In other words, the personal development is bringing more of your untapped potential to the surface. So you need this dynamic approach, personal development that really brings brings your potential more and more to the surface, and then robust technical and practical exercises that continually shape and mold what's there. And so this is where people sometimes have the difficulty within their development is that they're focusing on the wrong thing. That some of you might go, my development is practical exercises, going to seminars, doing all this practical work, and the personal development stuff is just a little bit I do on the side. You've underplayed one of the most important parts of your development. Some years you'll need like 90. I never think it's ever 100% one, zero or the other. There's always a balance of the two. It has to be dynamic. But some years it's going to be 90% personal development, 10% practical. And other years it's going to be the opposite. And other years it's going to be somewhere more in the middle. The trick is to listen to yourself and you'll know what you need. And what's always strange to me, it makes me smile, is that some students go, "Oh yeah, well this year I've just really spent looking after myself, like looking at myself," as though that's not their mediumship development. But of course it is. They just don't see the personal development as being part of it. So the reason I'm saying the first thing that we need to understand if you really want a development that's working for you is follow you have to listen to yourself, your own soul, and understand what it needs, and not see you need to do a bit of both. Always need to do both practical development and personal development combined is the magic key, I think, from over the years from what I've seen. But the percentage and the time dedicated to which one is something that will change and alter even through a year. Even through the year, there might be some months where you need to really move inward and reflect. There's something there that we need to bring to the surface. And other months where you're going to be much more about having to do practice and involved in that way. So the first thing I want to kind of teach you is don't see these two things as being something separate. You've got to really see them as one of part of the same thing, and you've got to listen to yourself and know what you need to be doing. Um, the second thing then is that let's take each thing, let's take each of these components separately now, your practical development, your personal development. What do we need to do in each thing? When it comes, let's start with your practical development first. And by practical development, I mean technical training and I mean doing practical exercises, working with partners, so on, working with the spirit world or the psychic level. The first thing that I think you we have to do is identify where the weaknesses are. Now, I I spend most of my time as a teacher not teaching you things. That's the that's the ironic thing about teaching. I spend most of my time undoing habits, undoing things that we've developed that are holding us back from surrendering and from moving into our natural expression. Um, and so we have to recognize that sometimes the teaching that we've received thus far has created some difficulties. I see that quite often. Sometimes I see people misunderstanding the teaching they have been given, which has caused them some problems. And other times I also see individuals creating habits, their own habits, which stop, and all of these things, if they become an issue, it's things that are stopping you from actually surrendering and following the communicator fully. So yeah, we have to recognize what's happening, what's actually happening within our expression. And the way that I will always do that for myself is I'll do a normal, like when I say a normal contact, what I mean is I won't be doing an exercise. I'll be saying, okay, I'm just going to do a contact. I'm just going to do my mediumship. Let Andy Byng do Andy Byng, and you should be doing you. And you just express. And look, the only rule in mediumship is that's why it's not much to teach in terms of the philosophy of mediumship. Follow. That is your only rule when you do a contact. You have to follow the communicator. It's very simple, but it's damn difficult, which is why you need help. We all need help. I need help. We all need help. But so when you're doing your contact, when you're trying to identify the areas of your weakness, you don't do that through exercises. You do that by just expressing your mediumship. And then afterwards, in like your feedback, when you start reflecting on these experiences, it's then about highlighting where what aspects of my expression are now stopping me from surrendering to the next degree. Right? What's holding me back? Where are my bad habits? What am I doing that's stopping me from just following my communicator? That may be I'm not comfortable going deep into the personality, or I'm not comfortable deepening my practical evidence. It may be that um, I'm looking and searching for evidence rather than just allowing it to happen. It may be that I've been taught this checklist approach to mediumship where I've got to get X, Y, and Z in the contact, and I'm looking for that now rather than actually just allowing the spirit person to express whatever they need. Like you have to have this overall understanding of your mediumship and what mediumship should be, identifying the areas. Once you've identified those areas, then I wouldn't say try and develop everything at the same time. I'm always looking at what's my top priority. What is the thing at the moment that's holding me back the most? I'm not going to try and do 10 things. I'm sure there's probably half a dozen things that you could find in everyone's mediumship. But what's the overarching thing that's really stopping it from flourishing? So once I've understood that, then I'm now looking at an exercise that will help me to strengthen that aspect of my mediumship. So I'm now going from this sort of overall overarching view to now focusing, breaking down my mediumship and really focusing on an element of it. And that's where the exercises come in. Now, when you do an exercise, it's different from doing your normal mediumship. So in the real situation, if I'm doing a demonstration or a private sitting, the rule is follow. That's it. In an exercise, a good exercise will allow you to express your mediumship naturally. So exercises that tell you you have to get this, this, and this in this order, or exercises that perhaps um there's it's too restrictive that makes you look for things. It's not a good exercise. The exercise has to give you the flexibility to follow and to allow the spirit world to unfold in their own way, but there will be a scope, and there may be a scope in terms of this is the type of information that we're going to go with. It may be a scope of I'm going to focus on a particular facet of my mediumship. And what you have to remember is you're working with an intelligence. So the spirit world can't hear you and they can't see you because they haven't got physical ears and haven't got physical eyes. But they understand the intention that's there. That's how they communicate with us, is the intention within the power, because that's what they're perceiving. So I might do an exercise with you, or you might do an exercise for yourself. I might do an exercise for myself. That is, okay, I'm focusing on the emotional facet of my mediumship. I'm deepening. This exercise is about deepening personality. Why am I doing that exercise? Because when I've done my contact, I've done me. I've recognized I'm finding it difficult to follow the communicator when I'm working with personality. So I'm now doing an exercise that's focused on that to help deepen and strengthen that part. So when I have that intention, the spirit world will respond to the intention. In other words, they will bring a communicator that will naturally want to help you with that part of naturally want to share that part of their expression. And so you're following the communicator because the intention there within the spirit world is to work with you on the exercise, right? So where people go wrong with exercises is they try and do a normal contact. If I'm saying to the spirit world, okay, look, we're going to focus on our personality now and deepen that, then the spirit world are going to respond to that. So if you start then to do practical evidence and messages, and you're not following anymore because the spirit person is going to be stricter than you are. The spirit person is going to share their personality. Why? Because they're trying to teach you something. They're trying to help you to develop and refine. And that's your intention that you've set. So you've got to, in the exercises, learn the scope of the exercise. You've got to learn what is what the common difficulties are, how to overcome those common difficulties, and you have to develop the discipline to do the exercise. And this is the thing that a lot of us miss. If you don't do the exercise as it's meant to be done, then essentially you're doing your own thing. Now, how do you think that translates when you do your normal mediumship? It means now you haven't developed the discipline to follow your communicator. You're just doing your own thing. And that's often what stops us from following in the real situation. So the exercises are not only developing a certain aspect or facet of your mediumship that you've identified and the spirit world have identified as being a weak area, it's also developing the discipline to follow, right? This, and then the problem is then what people try and do then is when they come to do another contact in the real situation, like a demonstration or private scene, you're just doing you and your mediumship, rather than then just following, they try to do the exercise during a normal contact. Well, you can't do that either because now you're imposing your set of rules on a contact that needs to be free, right? So a part of the development then is also to learn the difference between, okay, this is me doing an exercise and this is me um, doing my normal mediumship. So you've got to allow what you've done in the mediumship in the training to naturally bleed into your normal expression. You can't try and make it happen. You can't force it to happen. You just got to realize that if I do these exercises and I develop in this way, I'm creating like an instinctive muscle memory almost. Like you'll just start doing it without thinking, like driving a car. None of you think about driving a car now. You just get in and you drive. It's a little bit like that with your mediumship. It will just come second nature. So with the first thing is it's about and it's not just doing it once a year. You've got to do it regularly, every few months, looking at what's the weaknesses now in my natural expression. Let's look at a focus. Let's focus on an exercise that will focus on that area. When you go to seminars, if you're being taught properly, the seminar shouldn't be about performance or giving you just lots of nice experiences. It should be about identifying your need. The teacher should be helping you to find what your or identify where your weak area is, and then giving you exercises that help you to develop that weak area. And in the seminar, this leads me on to my last point. You also need to enter into the seminar with the correct mindset. Like that is the most out of all of the things I can offer you as advice, the biggest piece of advice I can offer you is that usually what holds students back in their development isn't their mediumship, it's their mindset, right? So when you go into any sort of teaching environment, the first thing that you can't do is try and emulate what you do in the real situation because it won't work. If you're doing when you're doing a private sitting or you're doing a demonstration, the spirit world are there not to teach you something. They're there to create these wonderful experiences between the communicator and their loved ones. So in a way, it's performance time, right? It's match day. Like you're there now to do your job. So the intention is different. When you go into a seminar or a training program of any kind, the spirit world aren't there to perform. They're not there to make you feel good and to give you these wonderful experiences that, well, oh, okay, I get all this stuff right. They're there to teach you something. So you're going to find, I find it still after 22 years, when I do a training session for myself, I have a lot of struggle. Why? Because the spirit world are going to give me contacts that are more complex than I'm used to, new experiences that I can be open to and learn from, and they're going to experiment with me and try things, right? It's training, it's not match day. So the difficulty that I often see with students is they go into a training session with a match day mentality. And be honest with yourselves, how many of you, when you do an exercise in a seminar, want it to go well? You want lots of yeses. You worry more about how much you've got and you actually judge yourself and value yourself based on how many yeses you have over how many no's that you have. That's what I call the performance mindset. And it's the most damaging mindset for a developing medium. Because if you have to be right, and if you're judging and valuing yourself based on how much you have right, is that giving you the freedom to experiment, to explore, to try new things, to be open to learn? No, because you're playing safe and we're scared to be wrong because I'm valuing myself based on how much I get right. So you're not actually opening yourself up in the right way to learn. You're trying to prove something to yourself or to the teacher or to your peers or so that is the biggest thing that holds you back. You have to realize I'm always saying to students, look, today I want 200 no's. And people look at me like, 200 no's? Yeah, not 200 yeses. I want 200 learning opportunities today. You can't really learn by being perfectly right. Makes you feel nice and it makes you feel good, but you actually want to make 200 mistakes today because then the teacher can go, this is why. What have you learned? When you do feedback, how many of you are, this is usually what I see in feedback. We go, okay, tell me then, how well did I do? Well, my grandmother did this, this, and this, and she did this and this. And you said this, but it could have been this, this, and this. And that was really good because you did this, this, and this. And we just basically hear the life story of the communicator, and the recipient is trying to kind of make you feel that you've done well, even if you've struggled. It's not helpful. In the feedback, it's about learning what's happened, like what's actually happened. Let's not make it fit. Let's not make ourselves, let's not sugarcoat things because it's not about, if you've got a learning mindset rather than a performance mindset, you're open to that. You're thirsty for that. What happened? What went well? Where can I improve? And it's not about judging yourself on performance. It's about taking that the sort of golden nugget of learning and going, that's what's happened. And that's what's happening within me. And that's what's happening within my mediumship. And now I've learned something that can inform tomorrow, something that I can develop now. That might mean that we now got to do some. So if I'm doing exercises and I'm seeing the same difficulty after 4 or 5 exercises, the same thing, that's highlighting an area of development. That's now a sort of flag for the teacher and for you. This is what I've got to focus on now going forward. Because this is what's really holding me back within this part of my. So we're constantly through the feedback drilling down into what's really happening within our mediumship. In other words, we're learning about what's happening within the experience. We're learning about how we're working with the spirit world. You can't do that if you're scared of performing. And you can't fully do that until you're comfortable within your own expression. And I'll be honest with you, from I've been very fortunate over the last sort of 10 years to have long-term groups. On average, I think it takes students about a year or two to get really comfortable with feedback, like just actually taking it in the ways, like in a constructive way within themselves, right? And actually being thirsty for that. Like, and you need to be. Like, I'm not really interested as a teacher or as a student of mediumship, which I still consider myself to be. I still practice myself. When I do my exercises and I do the feedback, I don't care how much was right or wrong. I'm thirsty for understanding something about my mediumship and what happened. And so, in your practical development, those are the three key things to do all the time. Meta level, like what's happening within my expression if I just follow a communication, where are the weaker areas? Developing robust exercises. They're not just random exercises, but exercise that can focus on that area of your development. So it's always focused. There's always a direction to your development. The direction is always, where's my weakness? Let's improve the weakness. And then through your learning, making sure that A, you're identifying the areas, you're giving the right exercises. The teacher's actually teaching you how to do an exercise properly. So we're not just doing an exercise once. My big red flag would be if I was a student, and I went to a seminar and we only did an exercise once for the whole weekend. Like we did one exercise once, and then we went to the next exercise, did that one once, did another exercise, did that once. I'd be questioning, well, what am I learning? It's like me taking you to a dance class and saying, okay, this is a square step. We do it once, then we go, okay, never look at it again. You want to really be focusing on a couple of exercises in a seminar and having enough time to really understand the exercise so that when you leave, you're now familiar with the exercise and you can now feel a bit more comfortable practicing that in your own time. Now you've got something you can really learn. And that often, to go back to my original point, it often makes me wonder because I obviously thought about it, why don't students practice what they're taught in seminars, one-off seminars that you go to? And then I realized part of it is not saying the whole reason, it depends as well what on the situation. But the question is, I asked myself, well, is it because they were comfortable enough with the exercise? Did they actually learn what the exercise was? And can they even remember the exercise after they leave? So when you go to a seminar, of any seminar, you shouldn't be there to have a nice time. That should be like a byproduct of the whole experience. We hope you have a nice time. But you should be there to identify where your weakness is and make sure that when you leave the seminar, you've got an exercise that can focus on that weakness. Then you've got something that you can then practice between that seminar and the next seminar. Right, that will give you direction then. Now, when it comes to your personal development, I often, um, the question that I often get faced with, we talk about it, is that you get students that say, okay, well, I've been doing personal development for like 20 years, so I'm done. Right? We've all heard that somewhere along the line, right? Been doing it for 20 years. And my new response now is, well, when you do your mediumship, do you ever feel tense? Do you have moments in your mediumship where you get attention? Well, yeah. So, well, there's still a lot of work to do then. I've been doing mediumship now for 22 years, and I think I'm probably like a little bit of an outlier in the fact that I've literally dedicated my life to it. I mean, I don't say obsessive, but kind of obsessive. I've really spent a lot of time trying to do something and master something within myself. And I've been doing that for 22 years now. And I'm again, I think unusual in certain ways in the sense that I've never stopped developing. Like I still sit regularly. I still have a little group of people that I still sit with once a month to actually practice. And I've never stopped that because it's something that I've always just loved to do. Now, I've been doing that for 22 years. When I do my mediumship, is there still tensions that is there still tensions there within myself? Yes, I'm a human. Of course. Of course, I have insecurities. Of course, I have things that are triggered from the past. Of course, there's certain things that make me feel uncomfortable. I'm a human being. So while I'm a human being, there's always room to develop. Because this is the thing that when it comes to personal development, we often think of it as I'm getting to know myself in the wider sense. And I believe in the early parts of your development, the first stage of your development really should be looking within and having this awakening. In other words, awakening that potential and allowing that potential to come to the surface, and that should direct what you develop. The second stage then should be self-awareness, actually developing your sensitivity. And through developing that sensitivity, having an awareness of who you are as a person, which is the foundation of your personal development. Often, by the time students come to me and I work with them, they've already usually been doing the mediumship for a few years, in most cases, if not at least been maybe have not done their evidential mediumship for a few years, but maybe have been doing healing or some other type of expression. So quite often people, quite rightly, and I think this is what they're saying, students are saying to me when they say, look, I've been doing it for 20 years, that they're trying to say, look, there's a self-awareness, and I accept that. There should be. But what I think for personal development, how I always approach this is I'm I'm trying to encourage you to reflect on the experiences that you have, your normal mediumship. And often when you're doing that, what you're doing is that you're reflecting on the experience itself. What went well, what didn't go well. You're analyzing that experience in terms of technical part. But there's also another level of reflection that you have to move into, which is to actually start to reflect on how did you feel within the experience? Not in terms of I enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it, not in terms of, well, I felt this emotion from the spirit person or not. How did you feel as a person? Was the moments of tension? Was the moments where there was a narrative in your head that you had the thought, your own thoughts, this is terrible, you're rubbish, give it up? Is the moments where you felt being judged? Is the moments where you felt very self-conscious? These are moments when these happen, this is what's stopping you from surrendering because all of a sudden now, rather than being beyond yourself and allowing yourself to be in the power and just following your communicator, you're now becoming very self-conscious of you and your surroundings. You're coming out of the power. In other words, you're coming out of the mindset. You're coming out of the state of awareness, I should say, that allows the mediumship to flourish. So the personal development should be looking at what's holding me back again from surrendering with the spirit world. We're doing that with our practical training, but we're also doing it within our personal development. And it's about recognizing that sometimes that may be what's holding you back is that you don't fully accept you're a medium. It may be that you don't trust the spirit world. This is one thing that people never like to admit to, but they go, oh no, I trust the spirit world 100%, but I just don't trust myself. No, I think you trust yourself more than the spirit world. Because when we change our experiences, or when we start to change our experiences into something else, then we're trusting our understanding of it rather than what we've experienced within the experience we've had. So is it that we're trusting, we're not trusting the spirit world enough? Is it that we don't accept we're a medium? Is it something that's been triggered from our past? We might have gone through life where every time we might have an opinion and we've been wrong about something, we've been made to feel humiliated. So now when you hear the word no in your mediumship, you go into that. That's what's happening. It triggers that sense of humiliation or a fear of judgment or whatever else it can be. So as we start to look at that, we now have to start to recognize what's stopping us from feeling safe and being able to be vulnerable. And that will start to open up into areas of our life. It might be our spiritual life. It might be telling us, okay, I've now got to, I've got to actually build a relationship with the spirit world. So I don't trust fully. And that's telling me there's something lacking in that relationship, which is natural. If you said to me, Andy, do you trust the spirit world 100%? I'd say, no, not 100%, no. I mean, I don't trust anything 100%. There's always an element of doubt in every relationship I have. But do I trust enough to be able to do my work? Yeah. Is there some ways to go? Is there still room to develop that relationship and deepen that trust? Yes. And that's what makes me go and sit in the power every day because there's still work to do. But when we say to ourselves, no, I trust 100%, there's nowhere to do, there's nowhere to go because it's perfect. And that limits us, that actually stops us from developing our relationships. So sometimes it's about that. Sometimes it can be about, I don't fully accept I'm a medium and actually owning that. That we might have convinced ourselves we're a medium, but we haven't lived it. It may be that we have to look in our wider life because there's certain things that we've gone through that are now affecting our mediumistic expression. So we have to actually, rather than just trying to find a way of coping with the symptom, the self-consciousness, the fear of judgment, it's best to actually go to the actual cause and begin to make peace with that part of ourself. And it's not about eradicating things. This is the thing about your personal development. It's actually about turning down the volume. Like it's always going to be part of us, but it's about turning down the volume of things so it doesn't actually affect our mediumship. Like I said, even with my relationship with the spirit world, I recognize it can always be deeper. It can always be more trusting. I'd like to think I was in the like the upper, the upper percentiles of trust, but it would depend on what I'm doing. I trust the spirit world much more in the evidential mediumship than I do the trance. So I'm open to that and I'm very honest about that with myself and I'm honest about it with you guys because I think as a teacher you have to be. Otherwise you have an expectation that's not manageable and then you never really feel that that you are where you need to be. So but again it's not about trusting 100%. I don't think Jesus trusted 100% either, by the way, because I think just before he was crucified he said, "Have you forsaken me?" He didn't trust 100%, he doubted. So if Jesus didn't, I don't think I'm ever going to be 100% there, but I might be 80, 90% of the way, right? And the thing then that helps with is um it it always makes us open to um developing, but it also means that I don't have to be perfect. I have to have reconciled myself with these parts of me enough that I can turn the volume of it down to a point where it still allows me to surrender and follow to the degree that I need to in order for the communication to do my work to serve. Right. So it's not about perfection. It's not about getting rid of parts of you. It's happened to you. It's a part of you. Why would you want to eradicate parts of who you are? But it's about finding peace and acceptance within our life and within ourself so that we we turn all the volumes down to a point where we can still do what we need to do and serve. That's that journey. But I'm running out of time, so I'm going to be quick. But there's spiritual practices that I think are essential to your development. Sitting in the power, meditation. These two things are different. Sitting in the power is a it's a practice of awareness. It's about having an awareness of your own power, an awareness of the spirit world, but really not having a particular experience other than an awareness of it. You shouldn't be communicating with an individual in the spirit world, and you shouldn't really be communicating with your own emotions within sitting in the power. It's about just holding your awareness in that within that power and experiencing the reality of it, the presence of it. Meditation is similar to sitting in the power. You'll find a stillness at the both practices require a stillness at the beginning. Both practices will require an awareness of the self, but in meditation, it's where you can explore certain parts of yourself. You meditate on certain things. So if an emotion comes to the surface, we now sit with that emotion and relive it and understand how it's affecting us. We're now meditating on something. Okay, so you need to do both things. And I used to be quite strict in my early days of developing. I'm doing sitting in the power, so I'm just doing sitting in the power. And if the emotion came, I would deny myself that possibility of exploring it. Now I'm very like fluid. I might go, okay, I don't even do sitting in the power anymore or meditation. I just sit and I'll either naturally move into meditation or I'll naturally move into sitting in the power. And I just let it, I'm allowing it to be what it needs to be. Because why would I deny myself an experience that I need? Right? It's a kind of it's vanity almost sometimes when you do that. When you do, okay, I've got to do sitting in the power, so I can't do anything else. No, just be a bit more relaxed. Let it be fluid. Let it move. I know sometimes we'll do sitting in the power and move it or move into meditation. Sometimes I'm sitting there actually. There might be an emotion that's come up within me. I'm sitting there trying to meditate on that emotion, and then I can't. I just move into sitting in the power, and I just have an awareness of that power of me and awareness of the spirit world. And I'm just happy with either or. We then have contemplation and reflection, and people don't know the difference between the two, and it is very different. Contemplation is an immersive experience. It's where you're actually reliving an experience without judging it, without analyzing it. It's just about experiencing that part of yourself. Right. So if I'm contemplating my childhood, like when a certain experience that I did at school, I'm not analyzing or trying to understand it. I'm just literally experiencing it and letting myself be taken there and reliving it. That's contemplation. Um, Reflection is where I'm thinking about I'm reflecting upon the experience. So I might again have an awareness of the narrative of what. Let's say I was bullied. Contemplation, I would relive that moment I was being bullied and how I felt and relive the memory of it. Reflection is partly the same thing. I'm going to go back through the narrative of what happened and how I felt, but I'm now going to analyze it. How did it make me feel? What meaning did it have to my life? How has it changed me? Right? So reflection requires analysis of the experience. And then we have prayer, which is really just a communion with that power of creation. All of these practices help you to navigate and understand the self. And it helps us to move forward within the spiritual journey of who we are, not to eradicate certain parts of ourselves, but to understand what's happened to us, to find clarity in the experience through that understanding, to begin then to accept what's happened, to forgive, to find peace and meaning. Right? It's a long journey. And sometimes the experiences that we have are so complex that we have to look at them multiple times over our life because we reconcile a certain part of the experience to ourselves, but there's other things that are unreconciled. So often people get frustrated that they're going back to the same issues all the time, but it's not that you haven't moved for you haven't it's not that you haven't unfolded and accepted parts of it. It's that you haven't accepted the entirety of the experience. There's still things that have been revealed to you. And that's all about getting to know yourself. It's not about, like I say, eradicating things or overcoming things. It's not about pathologizing where it's like this is an issue, this is a problem. It's just about getting to know yourself. And as you do that, then you're you're creating the right inner world that allows the surrendering to take place. And also by doing this, you and getting to know yourself, you're also allowing more of the mediumship to flourish because you've got the right qualities and the right inner world now that allows and supports the expression of the mediumship. So when you are looking at your development overall, this is why I say to students, look, 1 or 2 practice sessions a month is more than enough, right? And that doesn't matter if it's with me or whoever you work with. Going to like 1 or 2 practice sessions a month where you actually do an exercise is more than enough because you need time to sit in the power, to meditate, to reflect, to contemplate, to pray. You need time to practice, to build a relationship with the spirit world. And guess what else you've got to do? Live. So you need this holistic development. It shouldn't all be hyper intense on practice, 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 practice. Right? You got to have a balance of experiences. You got to listen to your soul. You'll know when it's time to do prayer. You'll know when it's time to sit in the power. You'll know when it's time to reflect, to contemplate. And I don't sit there in my house and go, okay, I'm contemplating now. I contemplate when I'm walking the dog. I reflect when I'm walking the dog and I'm doing the dishes. It's about building this inner life and being much more aware of the inner life. And so it's not about necessarily always having to have time to sit in a quiet room by yourself and sit quietly. It's about actually having a much more spiritual inner life. Like it's about not just being focused on the outside world all the time, but even when you're doing letting the outside world inspire the inner and really being aware of this inner life that you're living. But also, guys, it's really important and big piece of advice for you. You have to find experiences where you're not in the inner life anymore. Like you're in the physical, whether that's going out to get having a party and dancing all night, whether it's doing some, I do like, walking, DIY. I love to do, I love to do repair stuff and to decorate and renovate and I'll do that. I've taught myself how to do that over the last few years. I really love it because it gets me into my body. Now, when I'm doing DIY, like I've just been this weekend, I've just been renovating the nursery for the arrival of our daughter. It's been great because I've not thought about my emotional life. I've been very much in the moment, in the physical, working with my body, and that you need a respite from the inner life too. So it's about balance, guys, and it's about realizing that you can have time for practice, time for sitting in the power, time for that, but you also need time to be in the physical with people too. I don't think this sort of like cloistered life where you're rejecting the physical world for a life of inner contemplation. And again, I always look to, there's lots of people that, for some people, being a nun or being a monk and living in a convent and excluding the external world and having this sort of environment where they can just immerse themselves. That's for some people. But I also look at other people, other spiritual leaders, and most of them that I respect and that I think they were of the world. It's about that balance. It's about not trying to exclude the physical. It's about finding time for that too. So there's a lot to do within your development. I think what you've got to focus on are those core things. But again, I'm always advocating a sort of direction, developing with direction. And that really means being on top of your needs, focusing on the need, focusing on the weaker areas, developing the right mindset where you're not about performing, but you're about learning and accepting that the development is tough. Like it's not easy. You're not going to get lots of things right all the time. You're gonna get a lot of things wrong. But when you then allow yourself to do a normal contact, you'll start to see that you're following now through that struggle and that strife and honing and developing certain facets of the mediumship. When you then allow yourself to just follow, you'll find that you'll follow deeper, you'll be more consistent slowly. Consistency doesn't happen overnight, it takes years to get consistent, but you'll see that consistency starts to really happen. Um, and you'll start going somewhere. The mediumship will start going somewhere too. So I hope that's been helpful. Um, and I hope it kind of fills you with a bit of a bit of purpose and inspiration for the year ahead. I have got quick updates for those of you that are. I know you've signed up for the open house, so I've got 3 spots left now for next year for the mentorship program. It's filled up really quickly. I've been quite surprised. So thank you all for um, your interest and your trust in me, really. Obviously, what I've tried to do with the Progressive Group is to create a program that mirrors everything I've been talking about today. That's really what I've done within the program. So for those of you that are coming next year, and there's quite a few that are already in the program, will be there'll be time for the personal development, time for your practical stuff, and also the seminars and the way that I structure things is really trying to help you unfold what I've been looking at today, in that direction within the development. So if you are interested in next year, like I say, there's 3 places left. I am doing something called clarity calls. I should be organized here, shouldn't I? And I got you a link to it, but give me 1 second. I'm doing what I call clarity calls. These are usually just 30-minute calls for people that have got some questions or Usually, not always sure if they're ready for the course or if they're a good fit. So it's just a chance of having a chat. So if you've got the questions, I can answer them. There's definitely no pressure. There's no not trying to. Um, I want people that are committed, but also um, they feel it's the right fit for them. So it's just really a chance to have a chat and to see what's where you are. If you are interested, I'm just going to put this in the chat box for you if I can find the chat box. Oh, there we go. If you got some questions and you're interested, then here's the link to book a clarity call. There's some for next week and this week, next week. If there's not anything there that is doable for you, you can always just drop me an email here. I'll type this into the chat box too, and you can drop me a link there and ask any questions, and we can arrange a time if you want to have a chat about some things. I'm more than happy to do that for you. And that's it really. Like I say, there's 3 spots left. So if you're interested and you're wanting to do something, then feel free. And I might as well just give you the full amount because if you go to my website, my web page anyway, um, if you just want to go and have a look at the actual program, then you'll see it's also here as well. It's all the information that's there too for that. And that's it. Like I said, this talk was really about wanting to give you some advice for next year. I just really appreciate. I'm always very humble when people turn up for these things. Always humbles me that you're interested enough to spend some time. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. So I hope this session's been useful. I hope it's perhaps, like I say, giving you a little bit of direction. And if there's anything I can do, you know where I am. I will be doing Spirit Talk in the next couple of weeks, so hopefully I'll see you all there too. And it's been a pleasure. So have a great rest of the day, guys. I'm around, so if you want any advice, just drop me a note, and I'll be there for you. All right. So take care of yourselves, enjoy, and see you all soon. Take it easy. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks a
Pleasure.
lot.